there was a PlayStation Portable now, and everybody's bummed. All right. So here's the new book out, OS X Hack for Hackers at Heart. It's pretty slick. Any Apple fans in the room? Trade the book for the PSP. Deal. Didn't I give you something? No. All right. I'm not gonna throw this at you. I wouldn't.
Hey, you need to provide an anonymous way for that thief to give it back, or you'll never see it again.
It could show up at loss prevention. I mean,
I found this.
You know, we're not going to ask any questions if it shows up at loss prevention or lost and found, the hotel lost and found, whatever, and we'll continuously check there or whatever, see what goes on. Alrighty then. Not that I've ever played with anything wireless before, but I've been known to dabble. And I have seen a wireless intrusion detection system or two, and there are nifty claims made by vendors that will sell you tens of thousands of dollars worth of gear. And not to steal your thunder or take away from what you're going to be talking about, Eldon is going to talk about probably many different things, and whatever he doesn't cover, we can always talk offline about about other things, right? He's got plenty of nifty things to show you, and please give a round of applause for Eldon. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. I just got out of an elevator with two. It was stuck between floors, with two of those Kickster people out there. You know, the Amway. So no, I was already wearing this shirt. It was like, no. You guys know about this, right? This Amway, right? Amway got such a bad name that they renamed it. It's Kickster, and it's Amway on internet, And it's just caught in this elevator, already a little nervous about talking in front of people, and these two grinny people just looking at me and their positive energy just. The door opened, jumped out, and another elevator called. There was a Shmoocon goon grabbed onto him. Joel, take me away. So I'm here. Thank you for coming. A little background. I've got a degree in comp sci from Waterloo. Anybody Canadian here? Canadian? Cam. Okay, whoever. If you're Canadian, come up and get your beer. Like, how's it going, eh? I'm a terrible programmer. I had an assembler course in second year, and they told me that I was the worst programmer they'd ever seen. So, but I get the job done. Big fan of IDS systems. I was back, came to it through security through a sysadmin perspective, and I was at LISA 13. And Marty Roche is there. He's working for Stanford Telecom, and he gave this little talk about a lightweight intrusion detection. I was like, that's the cat's ass. Kind of cynical about marketing. See a lot of these things that, got tested out. I love wireless stuff. Personally, I've been working on with a build with a burger chain in Canada. Not to mention anything on their security, and so I've got sort of a vested interest, but kind of. Sorry. You know what? Is it okay if I take this out? Yeah. Positive energy. Fake it till you make it. Oh yeah. If you really want to fuck them up, okay. Tomorrow when they're selling these shirts, go over and buy a shirt, and when people look at you oddly, you go, "Fake it till you make it, man." That's one of their phrases. They love it. Go double diamond. I've got a guy that I golf with that has been sucked into this cult, so I'm a little crazy about it. Not that it shows, okay. So I like to, I'm kind of a troublemaker, sort of, but I try to be gentle about it, you know. So the last point, I like to stress systems. And, you know, there's going to be things that the FCC and Industry Canada aren't going to necessarily like too much. But, you know, we're talking about the worst things that could happen here. And we're making omelets, and you've got to break some eggs. Nobody wants their beer? No? So, basically, there's a client that wanted me to take a look at all these different IDS systems and say, wireless IDS, and say, okay, which one is the, you know, best? Being a, go crazy. No problem. You know, for their honorary Canadian. Oh yeah, Yuengling, the oldest brewery in America. Yeah. So, you know, NDA here, I'm not going to name the client, and I'm not going to badmouth any vendors, and, you know, I'm not affiliated with any vendors. So we'll just go on from here and see what abuse you can hurl my way later. So I'm not an RF engineer, but basically, you know, when you're setting up a Wi-Fi system, internal or outside, you've got problems with reflection and diffraction and scattering, you know. And you know, with this implementation that we did a couple of years ago, large scale indoors, especially when it's multiple remote sites, can be a lot harder than outdoors. Like you've got, you know, outdoors you've got basically, as long as you've got line of sight and you don't have a big tree in the way, you're, you know, not too bad. But you've got, you know, these crazy office buildings that have tons of glass and, you know, sharp corners. You've got reflections, refraction, diffraction, and, you know, scattering. And you've got, you know, I'm sorry for the ugly bags of mostly water. You know, that's, Trekkies here get that? Okay, so, sorry, I had to put that in there. But you know, when I was thinking about this, I thought, you know, when you're deploying wireless, you got the same problem as when you're trying to deploy a WIDS or a WIPS. So, you know, we've got, this is, I'm going to really just burn through this pretty quickly because it's pretty obvious sometimes, but you can find RF dead spots inches from one another. You know, this morning I was, you know, sitting in a session and the guy sitting beside me says, you know, oh, I can't get these, you know, 3,000 millisecond pings, you know, what the fuck is going on here? And he rotated his seat 45 degrees to the left and he was fine. So, you know, sometimes it's a surprise that, you know, 802.11 works as well as it does. So we'll come back to this later. So the brief history here. I figured I'd take a look at the underpinnings, you know, because no vendor's going to share with me, you know, their secret sauce. So I figured I'm going to just go on the net and see, you know, what's the original places where this stuff came from. And believe it or not, look at that. There's radar, an in-building RF-based user location and tracking system. A guy whose last name's bigger than mine, and you know, out of Microsoft. Anybody here from Microsoft? You know, I met somebody who works for Microsoft a couple days ago, and you know, I said, well, where do you work? He says, Seattle. And I said, okay, you know what? If you're really proud of where you work, you should just say Redmond. You know, you know, there's nothing to hide. You know, if you're a swinger, you know, just you're a swinger. You know, but you should be proud of it. And you know, but you know, if you're going to say Seattle, you know, you might as well work for Starbucks. Oh, sorry. Here, hey, my last beer disappeared. You know, I'm out. See me later. So identifying and tracking unauthorized 802.11 cards. The Usenix magazine login. Anybody Usenix member here? I'm like I said, came from a sysadmin power brother. It's like 93. So like I said, I came from a sysadmin perspective. So this was the first document that I saw that actually used 802.11. The radar session was actually for ID cards. But it's the same, you know, basically the same radio. So, location. So, pull out your trig from high school. I'm going to blast through this. But, you Well, if you know the output power of the transmitter and the gain of the antennas and the power drop-off, as long as you have 2 points, you can, figure out where this person is. But that's a big if, because you don't necessarily know what power of every device is. So you come up with a ratio, signal strength, and you end up with a simultaneous equation in 3 unknowns. And so you need 3 unknowns, so you've got 3 well-placed data points to figure out 1 or 2 solutions. So just go back here. You can see those copyright stolen, pilfered docs. 2 points, so one of 2 possible places. So a little heavy lifting. Like I said, I got a degree in math, but I don't like it. So, figure out your path loss and your signal fitting, and so through empirical curve fitting, they were able to track users to a median resolution of a range of 2 to 3 meters, so 6 to 9 feet for all the Americans here. And so, basically, these are pretty early papers, and they said, okay, the theory is sound, so what's the best thing that you can happen? And say, well, let's put a lot of distance between the probes and the samples, and the more number of data points you take, the better. But it's a little contradictory because you say, well, what's the trade-off? You've got 40 samples. Well, how do you evenly space 40 samples? So a little contradictory. So there's sort of that curve of what's the best number. So even back then, they're going, what's the limitations of this approach? And they say you can't truly track passive scanning. And so Faust came up and said, you can only trace 1 channel at a time, because he was really only working. He wasn't working with any kind of active system. He was working with 1 transmitter and just walking it around with taking different sample points. And then you take it back, crunches numbers, and it comes back. And so even with this very very rudimentary method, he was able to get find some interesting data. But he said, this kind of result that you get is going to have very large errors. In a reasonable input, set, you'll be fine. So from that, extrapolate to the present. It's like truly passive scanning likely will go unnoticed unless you see the person walking around looking funny. And it's not feasible to continually analyze or capture the traffic from every single channel all the time, unless you've got so many sensors that are going to look at every single channel on every single ABG. So you make these assumptions. Well, you live with it. Like so you don't know again how much power the transmitters are going to have. So make some assumptions. But like I said, wonky inputs, unusual results. So classic IDS, IPS. Choose a choke point, so a channel, a tap, inline. Catch as much as you can, identify a pattern, provide evidence that it happened. You spit out the alert, or you send the bidirectional SYN, whatever the action you've chosen for this when you make the match. And you pray that it's not a false positive, and that your sensor didn't get overwhelmed by all the massive amounts of data that your client, that the person upstream is doing, and that your signature base didn't miss something, shattering your false sense of security. There's so many times that, I've seen, my machine couldn't have a virus on it. I just ran semantic. I just did the latest, signature, and, there's no virus on my machine. It's like you get this false sense of security, and it happens to everybody, including me. It's like, so I'm going to go buy a system. So what do I want? I want to be protected from everything. And from managers, you're going to hear that all the time. Even fairly smart ones. So let's make it a little more realistic here. Hold on a second. Ill intent, and that's really what we want to do. We're not, not like we want to necessarily know about every single packet that traverses it. But we want to get, try to determine intent. So the first thing, rogue APs and ad hoc networks. And this is a big advertising point in all the whips. It's this, somebody in accounting or somebody on mahogany row with a C in the front of their title. Goes to Best Buy and for 40 bucks plugs in a router like they have at home, and they're instant wireless because they couldn't get it through, through their security department. So it's a selling feature, and it's one that's trumpeted, and it's valid. And so what else? Stop unauthorized clients from connecting to valid APs. Again, intent. So what else you want to do? Well, how do you deal with these things you see out there? Let's say a rogue AP. You want to connect to one. Figure out. Connect to it, authenticate, trace back to where you are, do an AD query against it. What else you'd like to do? You're going to pay a lot of money for it. Like Beetle said, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. You don't want it to just sit there and report when somebody walks by with a laptop. You'd like to use this as a diagnostic tool. And ideally, what I've always liked to see is something like the Doppler weather. When the clouds come in. That's what I'd like to see in a time delay sort of CSI sort of thing. And report use of sniffers. You figure that somebody's walking around with a sniffer and they're not supposed to be there. Well, the odds are pretty good that they're even if they're not necessarily doing anything necessarily bad, you might want to know that they're in your airspace. So why should we be testing this stuff anyways? It's like, well, as much as it, more than it was 2 years ago, it's not fait accompli. You haven't got complete corporate, wireless acceptance. And if this is one thing that's going to push it a little bit further, let's give it a try. And the IDS, wireless IDS and IPS, still an emerging technology. There is no clear winner. In the last year or so, there's been, buyouts and, wax and wane, and the technology gets updated quite frequently. And every vendor has their own approach and a philosophy. So, as a client, can your expectations match up to the vendor's philosophy and approach? And it's cool to try to break things. So, putting together an attack kit. As opposed to 3 years ago, plenty of code available now. A lot of alpha code, a lot of scary alpha code, and especially for somebody who's really not a good programmer, I can cringe even looking at it. How many Linux kernels do you want to compile today? There's nobody's going to focus on a particular build. So we ended up doing multiple builds on just trying to get as much code out there and just testing and see what could do it. OBSD, anybody affiliated with OpenBSD here? I wish I had another couple of beers. Love you guys. And Canadian too. Why don't you put your, not Canadian, but OBSD? Anyways, 3.7 came out while I was putting this thing together, and it had huge support for 802.11g and USB cards. I've used the Auditor CD before because sometimes I'm just really lazy. It's got some decent pre-compiled tools on it, and we've done some work on the wireless before. So we gather hardware from around the office, and did you really need an excuse to go shopping for new gear? No. Okay, this slide's left intentionally blank. Beautiful family. Okay, so this is the wireless a la carte. Okay, so I wish I had a mobile mic here, but so there's a lot of gear, and I didn't want to carry it around, and I wanted to take it as far as I could. I want to take it outside, and so I got 2 laptops. One's running, it's got 3 builds of Gen 2 on it. And one's got Open 3.7 on it. And I've got, you can probably see an amplifier there on the left. And there's a hardware disruptor. And then there's a 16 dB Yagi. And beyond that is a super pass antenna They're out of Waterloo. They were close and cheap. We've got a couple of other directionals. There's one behind it and one underneath it. Let's see. Oh, that's a laser. Laser. What I wanted to do was, take it as far as I could, get line of sight, and see if the attacks, how far can I throw this thing before the attacks come up. So. Oh, damn it, Janet. Okay, so built up a test case, or a bunch of test cases, and said, how well does each appliant identify each attack? How quickly does it do it? How accurately does it do it? What's the clarity? Getting a response and not understanding what it is isn't going to help us at all. Can the appliance link the attack to the intent? And we want to minimize operator exhaustion because, like I said, we've seen, if you get a lot of repetitive events, one, that aren't real, you see one that comes through and you just ignore it. So then the last part is, how well is the threat mitigated? So we started off with all these independent appliances and then started looking at added functionality in existing access points. So we start off with nice, slow, easy pitches across the plate. So, add an access point that's real close, and there's no reason that the appliances should miss any of these, because this is their, one of their big selling points. And then throw a couple little curveballs, that they still should be able to hit. And then some blended attacks. And then complete bad craziness, fear and loathing, dogs and cats sleeping together, throw everything you can simultaneously. And we're going to have a clean fight. So sensors and supplemental equipment set up as the vendors recommended. So no, nobody had a favoritism. There was no favoritism out of the gate. No tweaking or souping up or add this patch right now. The test suite was always run in a incredibly annoying, time-stamped. We started now, we ended now. And we ran with another network capture just to make sure that the test suite that's throwing out the traffic actually was doing it. So what do we find? And like I said, I'm not going to pick on any single vendor here. The versions and the features, they change very rapidly, but this is just a pretty basic general description of the things that we saw. So.
Evaluating only dedicated wireless IDS, or are you doing some of the hybrid solutions where they're actually providing client access and doing IDS?
We started off with the dedicated wireless IPS and went to access points that had this IDS functionality in it as well. That was that was later on.
So you didn't look at big infrastructure vendors that say they do something else? Like Airspace, for example.
Okay.
Aruba, Trapeze.
That's the first group that we worked with. Yeah, that are completely separate. So you're still dealing, so there's a high reliance, unsurprisingly, on SSIDs and MAC addresses on a client basis, and there's not a lot of correlation above single packets that come up. And you're not unsurprisingly, because you're catching certain portions of the traffic, you're only getting from what we've seen about 20 to 40% of the traffic. Unless you lock the sensor to a channel. You've seen that there's bad stuff happening on this channel around here, so you lock it down. There's some inconsistencies with identifying location, and we'll get into that a little bit later. These tests were run, I guess, about 6 months ago. By the time, they were not all that great at aggregating events. If you saw specific packets, it didn't do a very good job of linking these, by location together. from a forensic perspective, a lot of people just like to see all the traffic, and they'd like to be able to say, look, here's the traffic that's created. This is what triggered that alert. As you can, if it's background, so you can say, look, it wasn't fake, it was here. It's a supplement, not really a complete forensic, time-stamped, I guaranteed it was coming from this person at this time system. So there's some pretty bad things that happen. I wish I had a cooler up here. I would have kept it cool for you. Some pretty bad things that were surprising. One of the vendors' sensor completely froze after 5 minutes of dissociation. We started off by doing the storm, and it caught it, and we started going on to the next tests, and it didn't catch it. It was very unusual, and it just we kept going and going, and it's like there's no response whatsoever. What, do a reboot of it? We look at the alert and it still says the sensor's up. We figured it was probably because it's still connected to the wire, and it can still ping it. It doesn't think there's anything wrong because it's not seeing any packets, but it completely froze. So we had to reboot it, and I was like, well, is there a problem that what I've done? So we started the tests again, and infrequently you could make it freeze. So maybe 1 in 10 times it completely froze up. So another vendor's backend database is unstable. Like, well, that's great. The sensors seem to be okay, but then you're just not getting any reports, and very unusual behavior. It's just you'd think and they were embarrassed about it. Now the clients had a number of access points spread out there throughout their environment, and it was turned into a brick halfway through, and we couldn't ping it. There was power going to it. It was like I said, a brick. I don't know if it was because of a bad device, or if it was something, all the tests that we were throwing at the traffic. One of the tests was to take that MAC address and duplicate it and take it up and down and throw nasty traffic at it. So I don't know if it was a coincidence, or it was its time to go. Hardware disruption. So if you go back, one of the devices that I put on the wireless card was a hardware disruption. That it's sold to to stop. When you're traveling, you think someone's got a wireless camera on you. It puts noise into the 2.4 range, and it works pretty well. One of the things that was really interesting with a lot of the vendors, you just get very close to it. No need to amp it up. It's got like a little 3 dB antenna on it, and so you're looking at the screen. It's got ABG running, and there's always noise going on. All of a sudden, you turn it on, and the B and the G disappear. There's still some A stuff here and there, but a lot of these vendors, no alerts, no suddenly the B and G traffic that was there isn't, and there's no alert. So it's got to be okay, right? Yeah, and well, that's not everybody's gonna be walking around with one of these hardware disruption things, but it was like, that's kind of sobering, because I've just spent $85,000 equipment that you got to bring out your RF detector and say, oh, what's okay, who is it out here that's doing this? Some other surprising things. There was a lot of traffic, on the packet basis, that didn't even raise a blip. I'm sort of ambivalent on this. I don't think that we need to see every single little packet, but if that's all we've got, well, maybe there should be some kind of packet count or something on this. There were some vendors that this dial, right? So it was we will be hypersensitive to every packet, and we will inundate you with alerts. We'll let you know maybe if a rogue shows up at your environment. But so some of them clear to send, request to send. A lot of the EAP stuff, I said, it's pretty much split half and half. It would detect it or it wouldn't detect it. The Corec WEP, I don't think anybody detected that. Actually, I think one detected that. I do lots of just plain garbage packets to see what it would do. I start off, small packets and just build up to large packets and back down again. Lots of garbage, and it's nothing, really difficult to do about this. Like I said, I'm a crappy programmer, but I get the job done. False positives. There were, unsurprisingly, a number of them. Soft AP. There was one vendor that had did a lot of soft AP alerts, and so I looked at this and I was like, I recognize this set of addresses. That's kind of unusual. It's it's that implementation I've been working on, and I know it's not soft AP, but they for some reason thought that it was soft AP and that it was someone trying to break it, offering soft AP access, and it was just that burger joint. Some of the tests that I was doing with just putting out some traffic to this hunter-gatherer. I'd never heard of. Anybody heard of hunter-gatherer? Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's basically I did a little looking up on it, and it's basically you've got you're trying to match. It's like you're trying to match the access point to. How am I going to describe this? Let's say you've got an access point that you're running on channel 6. So somebody comes in and puts a fake AP in on channel 6. So then you move your legitimate channel to channel 1. And so they move to channel 1 and, follows like that. So that's hunter-gatherer. I wasn't doing hunter-gatherer, but that's what I thought it was. This was one of the ones that was more on the show me everything that possibly could go wrong on this system. And the big problem, I guess, is that the appliances don't really have a good feel for what your typical traffic is like. What's the your typical lay of the land surveying the horizon, across your site. On the plus side, I had to do a Nessus scan, and nobody fell over, and rogue access points, they're low-hanging fruit. And they did a pretty good job of detecting when there were access points that were being added to the system. And they're in the beginning, I guess this is maybe about a year and a half ago, the vendors were very go, generally about knocking down rogue access points that came in. Now they're taking more reasonable precautions, making sure that you're not taking down your neighbor, because the congestion is just so much higher now than it was 3 years ago. Still. And some vendors offer.
What are those precautions that they're taking to make sure that they don't take down neighbors? I talked to a vendor who would disassociate just about everything.
Well, basically, it's like, are you really sure you want to take this down? And and some, not necessarily automatic. Like, are you really sure? And you hit yes, and there were vendors that said, unable to do by FCC regulations. It's like, well, okay, well you get some points for trying, I guess.
Well, wait. So some of them will try to determine if the device is on your network before doing something more dramatic.
Yes, and I'll get to that in maybe 3 slides. Yeah. Handheld scanners. It's still there's still no one product that I could see that was guaranteed to get you, here's the person that was doing it, guaranteed, and take them down. There's a lot of entropy. You're best to go around with handheld, and a lot of the vendors do offer, a walk-around scanner unit. So you get an idea where they are, and then you go out, with a big stick that says please on it to tell them to stop. Now, session containment. Is Josh right here? Josh? Oh. That's too bad. I'll have to go out and say hi. Basically, this is the Josh. Josh, no, I've seen your picture before. You're right under the light. I can't see. So this is the P, the prevention side. So, you know, a nice tiny focused DOS. And Josh wrote a paper last year that I didn't see until I'd finished most of the testing. Like, weaknesses in wireless LAN session containment. And I asked Josh if I could quote this here, and it's a very interesting paper. So he's gone down a very, very fine packet detail and take a look at a bunch of different products and say, how do they perform containment? Like, going back to the different perspectives that they, you know, what's the philosophy behind it? So, you know, sequence numbers, signal power, you know, how do you do a disconnect notice? What he did, this is brilliant. Sir, I'm unworthy. Configured his driver to ignore deauthentication and dissociation frames. So, you know, you're being a bad guy doing your rogue access, you know, using your rogue access point. The IPS comes out and says, dissociate. And you say, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I don't need you. When the WIPS does a unidirectional against the client, you've patched your driver, and you just keep going. So, you know, what he basically said was, you're better off with, you know, bidirectional. And I assume that, you know, if it's not in the case right now, most IPS, wireless IPS, are going to be doing bidirectional deauthentication. I'm unsurprised, but very good. The appliance is no longer passive; it's fingerprinted. He did it, hacker. One of the things I thought was really interesting was the power consideration. Like, it's easier with the math if you make certain assumptions about the power. So here's an action memo. Not every access point is 35 milliwatts with an omnidirectional antenna. So, you know, what's the admittedly ridiculous conclusion? You know, so hook up an access point, amp it up, put it to Yagi, and let's paint this place. Power, you know, it's like a hose for paint, and we're dealing with a reflection and refraction. So it was like, well, let's figure out where in this building I can bounce the signal off. You find that, got the laser, remember? Laser, and what it ends up doing is, with enough power, you can light up the entire building. And every single sensor says, I see you, it's right next to me, and it's full strength, damn it! So let's paint this place, you know. And you know, I didn't know who to use as a picture here, but like, is it just me, or is she a lot sexier now that she's been in prison? Really? Okay, so DEF content. I know I said the D word here. Sorry. Fake AP. The two monsieur in the front talked about it this morning. Bonjour. They fake AP. So, you know, it was you know, how to spew a bunch of MAC addresses. You know, pretend you're an AP, make lots of noise, fill up the neighbor tables. Well, you know, that's okay and all, but you know, almost every WIPS these days can say, okay, I see, you're doing a fake AP attack. That's pretty funny, you know, ha ha ha, alert. So, well, let's just make it a little bit noisier, you know, so a random number of IP addresses, and give your soft AP vendor valid MAC address and a random channel. Fill your local ARP with, you know, the appropriate IP address information, and enable web. And I said, you're never going to hear anybody here, Shmoocon, say enable web. Say, enable web. You know why? Because you're going to throw a bunch of traffic on the net, and the IPS is not going to be able to decode it. So, let loose a ton of random traffic, lather, rinse, repeat, and see what happens here. And let's add it to that crazy, you know, let's paint this place. So, again, you've got all these access points, and it's, you know, this is pretty pathetic, you know, when it comes to, but you know, really what I was trying to figure out here is there's a lot of devices that the dissociation part, the IPS part, is the same as the sensor part, the sniffing part. So it's like, well, if I can create a lot of traffic here, there's got to be a certain amount of time that it's sniffing as opposed to dissociating. So what's that percentage? And so what's the maximum number of rogue APs that you can find in here that can be disconnected simultaneously? So there's going to be a trade-off. You know, something has got to give. So what else was there here? Associate. Oh yeah. So there's a few vendors say, well, we'll associate with the client and we'll communicate with the switch, and because everybody's using bridges these days, and we'll find out the MAC and we'll shut down that port. No big deal. So because there's never anybody on the inside who's pissed off about anything, so they wouldn't know the MAC address of your database or a mail server. It's like things you wouldn't really want to shut down. And so we talked to one of the vendors about this, and they said, well, that's a bad thing to think about, shut down that. But in any case, in your instance, it's not going to be a problem because that's on a different VLAN, and we can't jump VLANs. And so about 2 months ago at another conference, this one vendor downplayed this automatic capability. They said, we'll detect it, and we'll let you know, and then you can go out and make the decisions that you want to here. So then we went to access points with IDS, and it makes this makes sense from a marketplace perspective. You want to differentiate your product, so it's like, well, okay, we build access points. Well, what can we do? Can we make them more secure? Let's put some IDS on it. And so very briefly, you've got traffic going on, so you interrupt and you sniff quickly. You continue back on your usual AP duties, and in theory, it's pretty good, and in practice, it's usually okay. Now, if you got older firmware, there's some problems. Symbol devices. Anybody here from Symbol? No. They make very strong equipment, but I don't know. They seem to be very finicky unless you're hooked up directly to Symbol AP. So they don't like this very much either. One thing that was kind of interesting that we found about SIP phones. Now, I'm not a SIP master. There's something I read, something about 150 milliseconds that you've got basically to deal with the lag. And there was an access point that we tested that had this IDS functionality that as soon as it detected that SIP was being used, it stopped doing IDS completely. All right. So, and it was interesting, and they, said, yes, we knew about that, but let's not talk about it. So I'm not talking about today. So this is a sort of mildly playful list of I don't know why you'd want to use a rogue AP, but so bring your AP in, duplicate it. Thank you. Duplicate the MAC, the SSID, and the channel. That's at the furthest corner that's currently away from you. And there's going to be so much noise on your network that maybe whoever's in charge of tracking these things down gets really lazy and says, it's just that again. It's not a problem. And so turn the power down. Symbol Spectrum 24, full frequency hopping, so it takes the whole range and just does this scatter thing up and down. I think it only does 2 megabits per second, but nobody said it was going to be fast here, right? Channel 14, that's one thing I wanted to try but didn't get a chance to. Everyone know what channel 14 is? Japan. I don't know if it works here. This morning, I just modified this. I just submit my slides earlier, but I've made a lot of changes since then. I've got an URL later on. So this morning, described a way to do covert channels through in bad frames. Very good, very good. Again, this is mild-hearted. Don't if you lose your equipment, or there's a you probably have a security policy in place that says don't do this. You might get fired. Get a black mark put in your permanent record. I don't know. So basically, it's still an emerging technology. There's plenty of shakedown in the market. There are some vendors are looking to be bought out by larger vendors. they still, most of them still operate in black box mode. It says, we see this attack. We're not going to really necessarily tell you that there is a problem. We're not going to tell you why we think there's an attack, but there is one. Like I said, some vendors sell the combo package, so you've got the hardware that deploy out in your infrastructure, and then you've got the handheld, and some that goes on the client. Some of it I think, might be sort of a money grab. Some of it looks like, especially the ones that you're walking around with the equipment, with the supplemental unit, it looks like a good idea. And the more time you're going to spend on these, especially the better ones, you can tune. There's some tuning you can do. So like the more fair feeding and care that you do, you're going to get better results. It's still not necessarily a plug and play with it situation. And this is a happy marriage. It's like a hot tub. I've got it. Do 5 minutes of maintenance a week, and I've got a good hot tub. So you're going to be wed to this your intrusion prevention system for whatever your write off, 3 years, 5 years. So let's figure out what you want to detect first of all, and don't believe anything in the beginning, just like dating. So date first, then live together, and test to see if it's still working. Test it regularly, just like you should test your backups. Go out and do it from a distance, and do it on a weekend, and warn your neighbors, and don't get caught by Industry Canada or the FCC. It's sort of a post-holiday wish list, and there are vendors that are already doing certain ones of these. Because of this chance to rip apart sniffing versus attacking, so I call it sniffer and sniper for lack of a better terms. So you don't inundate one box with all this traffic. Thanks, Chris. So steer away from just the per packet alerts and towards the whole horizon. Heartbeats against sensors, like I said, that hardware disruption where the the A or the B and G just disappeared. That's not cool. Just you set up some kind of heartbeat between these sensors that come out and say, look, we can all still talk to each other like we could 5 minutes ago. So at DEF CON last year, the Shmoo had this Kismet vulnerability. I said, wouldn't that be cool if an IPS could detect that Kismet problem, and shut that down? And I think from an ongoing perspective, if you could get, grab data from access points that are in use and analyze them, as part of that analysis, I think that'd be great. And on Bluetooth, wireless USB, how much wireless are you going to detect in your environment? When are you going to stop? The last two are kind of goofing around. I really want to thank Josh. When he saw that I was speaking on this, he offered some help, some talking points, and some information. Thank you, sir. FabCore, I love them. SuperPass, it's local. It's not up right now, but it'll be within the week, and I'll put the code up. I've got to clean it up. So if you got any questions, I've got a couple minutes. Sir. Yeah. there are some of them have settings for microwave sensitivity. That's I don't know if that's, but not all of them. Understandably, sir.
What did you use for your hardware disruption?
There's a unit that I got on the internets that just does that. If you Google hardware or Wi-Fi camera, Wi-Fi camera disruption or something like this.
I've heard there's a cheaper alternative on eBay. Base stations for certain 2.4 gig phones. If you push the button to find your phone, it kind of does that.
Yeah, you may have to do a little solder. Sorry, for those who couldn't hear, some base units for 2.4 gig phones can do this. You might have to do some soldering. Anything else, sir?
I just wanted to follow up that with, you
said you're going to put your code up on the site.
Yeah.
Is there like more organization to it, like in terms of what you had for your testing procedures? Is that something you can divulge?
I'll put. I got to go through some of it. I got to see how much I can actually say, but I'll put some healthy, parts up, and you can come up and grab my card, and I'll give you my address, and you can just get a hold of me. Okay. Does anybody? I've got only a couple of minutes, but I had to do this. Okay. Anybody know who this person is? Okay. So she was doing something last August with a company. I wanted to ask her a question this morning when I was in the session. I said, I wanted to ask her, if someone was going to reveal a vulnerability today, what would be your advice to them? But she never took my question. So here we go. You know what this is? No. P. This guy is the thinker, and so when you get on this Ritalin, it helps you to. So he would be a. No. So, okay. So here we go. Okay. So really short. Should I have got them to turn the video off for this? So disable HTTP.
It's disabled by default.
Really? Because
Yeah.
that's
Latest code is disabled by default.
really?
Yeah.
How? Not the release that came out.
7.8.
What was this? About a month and a half ago? 2 months ago?
It came out the end of November.
Okay, because I tried this on a lot of different revs, and
We're talking about the Cisco Airspace appliance, right?
no. Oh man. Okay, we're gonna do this all once again. Okay. Right. Everybody.
We're talking about wireless.
Well, yeah. I just had you guys have been so good, and you've sat up. Thanks. You waited here, and so I've got the get the hell off the. So this is my daughter. Just very quickly, she loves the Shmoo ball from last year. I've got a couple of T-shirts here. The first couple people, 4 people, who can come up here and give me their Shmoo. Not hit me in the balls or the face. Give me the Shmoo balls, and I'll give you a T-shirt. Just a second here. Got to make it worth your while. Okay, they've got tiny little logo on the front and nice discreet lettering on the back. The first 4 people. Thank you. Okay, I got actually ours here. Sticker? Okay. I got my
Go well?
I think so.
Sorry, I couldn't see it.